it's interesting because when you talk about networking and kind of putting yourself out there, there's so many different, ways and opportunities. Because I think about when I started thinking about like, what are all the different like tactics and strategies and things you can use? There's events that are very structured, like a conference. You've got networking groups like this. You have online, through social media. And I'm a big LinkedIn fan. I literally don't have any other social media except for LinkedIn. Because I'm B2B, that I think most of you probably are as well. And I just was finding that, well, I'd tell you the truth, I got kicked off of Facebook because a friend of mine, just for 24 hours, but it made me mad. A friend of mine, Ginger Bell, some of you might know her name, was talking about something on Facebook. And she had been asked the question, if you were on a deserted island, who would you want to be with? If it was stranded on a desert island, if not a family member. And she said, Sue Woodard, because we'd have a great time. We'd find a way off the island, and we'd find a way to have chips and salsa and margaritas along the way. And I responded to her and I said, that sounds like so much fun. I might come kidnap you and get you to a deserted island. And the word kidnap in my post, they suspended me for 48 hours or something. And I was so irritated by it that I was like, you know what? I just don't need to be on Facebook. So I'm missing out on probably some things, but I probably also have some personal sanity I didn't have before. So LinkedIn, we'll talk about LinkedIn definitely a little bit. And I think there's just some daily life opportunities, like Leslie was just talking about, going and meeting with people. So I'm going to share, like I said, just kind of some of my own thoughts and experiences. And then, like I said, I really want you to please jump in, because we can go a lot deeper on different things. And I see some things popping in the chat, which is great as well. Molly was asking me some interesting questions the other day, because we're chatting just for a couple minutes, as I was like, well, how long is this? And we get an hour, right? So we got 35 minutes. Yeah, Molly. Okay, good. And just kind of who is going to be on the call, and, what to expect. And she was like, but, were you like, you weren't always like a great, networker. And I would say that that's true. Some of you, I think, Deb, you mentioned like, I'm heads down, like I'm just getting the work done. And I think, women in particular tend to be that way. There's just stuff to get done. We're going to get it done. And you don't always, have the time to, sometimes do the things that are really going to be for you, right? Because we're just taking care of business. And so, and I will definitely say, when Molly like prompted that thought, I was like, no, that's true. I definitely was not always intentional about it. But I will say that I learned my whole life about kind of connecting with people from my dad. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and it was very interesting because I remember at his funeral, there was countless dozens of guys who came up to me and said, your dad was my best friend. And that was a testament to, that's how my dad always made people feel. And I would observe my dad even when I was young. And this is probably one of my top networking tips, is my dad would always notice when we were at anything, at church, at a dinner, at anything going on, he would kind of notice who wasn't fitting in and draw them in. And it was an amazing talent that he had. And weirdly enough, it is a very powerful way to network. If you walk into a room, you walk into a conference, you walk into, anything, online or in real life, there's somebody who usually maybe doesn't, isn't fitting in, isn't, whatever. And to take a moment to, and sometimes I get it, people just want to lay back, but usually everybody wants to feel included. Everybody wants to feel special. Everybody wants to feel like they fit in. And when you can be mindful of drawing people in, then you tend to draw a lot of people in, with that. And all of a sudden the conversation, instead of just, you go to those dinners sometimes and you end up with 8 people at a table and all you're talking to is the person next to you because it's so loud. And if you can take the opportunity to, have a topic happen and say, well, let's all talk about, where's our next dream vacation? Where are we going? And then people, I remember having a really awesome dinner at a conference recently that I could tell was going to be all of us talking to the person next to us, and that's it. And so I kind of managed to be like, hey, let's cheers to our host. And then, gosh, I'd love to hear where you all are going. I'm trying to plan a vacation. I'd love to hear where you're all going. And it ended up being this very cool little round robin where everybody went around and shared about kind of where they were going. And it enabled this group of people to have this great conversation together in a situation where that wasn't going to happen. One of the other things I remember my dad sharing with me, I remember I was applying for one of my first jobs in financial services. I've been in mortgage for 35 years, and I had worked at a title company and went off to college, and I came back and I was applying for a job at a credit union. And I remember I was asking my dad for advice about the interview, and he said, the most important thing I can tell you about the interview is you've got to ask all of the have a list of questions that you want to ask that other person. And I was like, Dad, that makes no sense. It's an interview about me. They want to get to know me. This is not about me asking questions, which again, I was like 21, so I was like, but I remember I went in with a list of questions on a piece of paper. And in asking those questions, I really learned very early on, when you ask questions to other people and really genuinely listen to the answer, you probably, like me, have had a night where you've gone out with a friend and you've just had you come back and you're like, that was the greatest time and I just had so much fun. And you realize they're a very good question asker and you got to talk about yourself all night. I mean, it's everybody's favorite topic of conversation is themselves and what they have going on in their life. And so, that's probably, again, one of my top networking tips is being very thoughtful about how can you ask questions? How can you turn it back, to them and really listen to what they're saying? I think most people in this world, personally and professionally, probably don't really get intently listened to very much. People are multitasking. People are, their own problems are right up here. And I think it is a great gift to give someone that they may not appreciate it right in that moment, but they will later and over time when you really give that gift of asking them questions and engaging with them and not talking about yourself. I think we tend to think, like I did in my interview, hey, an interview is about you learning about me. Hello. And we think, probably sometimes a lot of people say, well, networking, it's about having your 30-second, pitch down, but you gain so much more and such a more meaningful connection when you are actually asking, everything about that person. They're going to walk away from that interaction going, oh my gosh, I love that person. And you'll get the opportunity to follow up and share more about what you do, or you can share a little bit, but the more you can turn it back to them. I also would tell, is there anybody in here would describe yourself as an introvert? Okay, like a couple of hands. And yeah. I am what I would say, I'm an extroverted introvert, meaning I can do it. I can go into the thing and be at the conference and do all the stuff. But it takes it out of me. I have to go recover after that, right? I mean, Kristen, I can see you nodding, you get it. And one of the things I found is it also it protects you. It protects your energy when you constantly just turn it to other people. Like I'll go into networking situations exhausted, but I think all I have to do is just ask them questions about themselves, and people love to talk about themselves, right? And so you not only make them feel really good and give them the gift of really listening to them, you give yourself a little bit of a break, because you don't have to be the most entertaining person in the room. You don't have to be, super engaging. You don't have to tell funny stories. You need to be a really great listener. And as I said early on, find ways to draw other people in. And I will do that sometimes in, the craziest ways. I mean, I usually will, a lot of times, whether it's online or in a live setting, I will always find something to compliment about someone. People have, Leslie, I have to tell you, I love, I don't know if it's a dress or a shirt or whatever you're wearing, but it just, it pops on the screen and I love it. And so if we were in a live setting, I would tell you oh my gosh, I love that. Where did you get that? That's so cool. I already told Jill, because seriously, as soon as she popped online, I was like, that girl's hair is so cute. I just love her curls. Right. And so I think when you can, genuinely find something, if you've ever been, again, at a conference, there's always somebody wearing, some funky pair of shoes, or they've got some, people are kind of trying to stand out. you can always kind of grab, some unique thing to, to be like, oh my gosh, I totally love that. Where did you get that? And I think women in general, we love to be asked about like, where'd you get that? Because I love to tell people like, it's from Target. Can you stand it? It's so cool. It's from Target. I mean, women love to talk about these things, right? So I think finding those ways to just inject some positivity, into those discussions and talk about something that's a little bit different. One of the things, and I want to look up who said this. I think it was Laura. Did you say something about that you had the opportunity to do some speaking? Yes. Okay. I thought so. So I want to talk about that for just a minute, because I will say that was probably one of the biggest networking game changers in my career. And Jenny, you asked the question on there, kind of how do you position yourself to be asked to speak in panels and such? And so let's talk about that a little bit. I had the opportunity very early on to go, do some speaking engagements. And I had no idea what I was doing. I never had any aspiration to do any speaking. And I was pretty bad at it when I started. I mean, and everybody is, and you're learning to ride a bike in front of a bunch of people. In fact, Laura, you talked about that event at Todd Duncan's Sales Mastery many, 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 many years ago, right? 20 some years ago. I was throwing up backstage like immediately before you saw me like walk on stage, because I was just like nervous. I didn't know what I was doing. However, I can say without a doubt, it has brought me absolutely the most dividends in terms of the network that I've been able to form over the course of my career. And many of you have also been in the industry, a long time. We didn't have social media. We didn't have LinkedIn. We didn't have any of these wonderful ways that we have to connect now. So back in the early 2000s, that was the way, we're tracking on with our pagers and going to events and doing things like that, right? And so encouraging you about, and I want to talk about attending conferences, but any opportunity that you can get to speak, to present in front of any kind of a group. I remember reading a story about Tony Robbins, about how he became such a masterful speaker. And he said that he had read that you have to, speak something like, 150 times before you're starting to be good. And he said, well, I'm going to fast track that. And I'm going to speak everywhere I can. I'm going to try to speak 10 times a day so I can get this over with in like 15 days. And I thought it was very interesting. And I did a little bit of that. I mean, I would speak anywhere, I could get a chance to do so. And I think about positioning yourself to do that. Right now in our industry, there is a lot of need of, like you all just talked about, your fields of expertise, and there's so many people that need to know the knowledge that each of you have. And if you are willing, and especially because we can do these things online now, you don't necessarily have to get on a plane and go somewhere. That means that you can do it pro bono, and you can share of your knowledge, you can share of your wisdom. You just need to find out who needs to know what you know about. And I would say, Jenny, to answer your question, probably the best way to position yourself to be asked to, speak on panels and or at events is, I would be very clear about, first of all, developing what it is that you can speak about with authority. Develop a blurb, and a blurb is kind of a couple of sentences. And then it's like, here's a couple bullets of the things that anybody listening to me is going to walk away with very specifically. I think you all have been in the industry long enough to know that, people don't want, we've all been to so many conferences, and we've heard so many panels, and lots of them, they're fine, but they're either so high level, or there's nothing applicable that you can take. And it doesn't mean that they're bad. It's just, like I just have personally such a heart for, giving people something where they can say, I have something I can literally go back to my desk and do later today. I can do this thing later today. And we're going to talk about that before we wrap up this call. So I would encourage, all of you with this wonderful field of expertise. I mean, my gosh, I heard things from, compliance and innovation and talent acquisition and risk and controls, and so many interesting fields that you have. Come up with your blurb and put it out there in social media, and just say, I am right. I would like to offer my knowledge and education, and I'm willing to come on for, 30 minutes with your team and share about, just sharing knowledge. I'm not selling anything, but I just want to, here's the places in which I want to educate you. And here's my bullet points. I would apply at any of the industry events that are coming up. It's just a good exercise to do, whether you get to present or not, or whatever. You're getting your name out there. You're getting somebody's attention that, wow, this person knows about this. And you just never know kind of when somebody might say, somebody falls out of something and they go, oh my gosh, I remember that amazing person who raised their hand about QC, and now we know this person. And so some of it is just putting yourself out there. And we do at least now have social media to be able to do that. I think along those lines, I know, like for many years in my career, there's people that will, reach out, especially once you start speaking and putting it out on social media. People want to connect, right? And they want to talk. And there are times that you don't have time, you don't have time for a brain picker, or like, oh, I just want to ask you some questions. But pretty much 100% of the time, I will take those calls. I will take that connection. I will have that meeting because everybody, oh, there's lovely Suha, who I adore. I will take those, and I always have in my career. And there have been times where I've been like, I am so exhausted. Like, I don't have time for, I just can't do another 30-minute call with, but I've always done them because it's just, so many people have poured into me in my career that I just feel like I kind of have always felt a responsibility that, man, I need to pour back into others. Other people are coming up or trying to figure things out or trying to connect. And I don't mean everybody who's trying to sell you something, because I think we know the difference, right? Somebody who's just trying to connect with you, and somebody who is trying to sell you something. But people who are trying to connect with you, take the time and do that. Even if you're like, this doesn't do any good for me and my career or whatever else, it still is the right thing to do. And it is amazing the benefits that come up from taking those opportunities. And I know people have taken those opportunities for me. I would encourage you that if there are people out there in your space where you're like, wow, I want to get to know this person, or how would I connect with them? I encourage you to have the courage to reach out to them and ask. I think you would be shocked at the number of people that would say, yeah, I'll jump on a call with you. And again, especially if you're just saying, hey, I just really admire, I'd like to learn this thing, whatever it is, don't present it as you're trying to sell them something. But if there's somebody you feel like, man, I want to connect with them, I want to learn from them, I want to just meet them briefly, I think you'll be very surprised at how many people, as I said, say yes to it. What I would encourage you to do, somebody gave me this advice years ago, and I thought it was really valuable, is if you're going to ask of someone's time, if you're going to say, I would like to talk to you for 30 minutes, and I would like this time of you, be prepared to give something of value. Be prepared to, what can you give to them? And you may have something in advance. You might have, access to a special report. You might, I don't know, be willing to say, hey, if you're willing to take this time, I'd love to make a small donation to your favorite charity, or you might even learn something during this call where you say, hey, based on what you talked about, I've got some resources I'd like to send you. But be prepared and go into it with a mindset of what can you give back in return for that time that the person is doing. But I think you'd probably be surprised again at the number of people that actually will respond to that and definitely engage. I'm going to take a breath and talk for a minute about conferences. So how many of you are, and this is answering a little bit Tara's questions about what avenues of networking have I found best, is conferences, is probably LinkedIn and conferences are my two. That's number one and number two of the most successful ways. And I want to talk about conferences first, then we'll talk about LinkedIn. But how many of you go to conferences or have the opportunity to go to conferences? Okay, some of you are saying no. Now, is that, Leslie, I'm going to ask because I'm still looking at that cute shirt you have on. Is that why don't you?
It was Old Navy from years ago.
Oh, I love it.
I know, right?
Yes. So tell me, you don't have the opportunity at all to go to conferences?
No, I don't. I didn't in my last role, and I don't in this one either.
Okay. And is that because like you've asked and you've been told like, no, that's like not for you, like not for your role?
So my last company, when I was in vendor management with Chase, it was only the very senior people went. And so I wasn't at the top of the organization, so I wasn't eligible to go. I've been over here at this role for just a few months, but it's kind of set up the same way,
Okay.
where we're a younger company. We're 5 years
Yeah.
old. So we are just in the last few months starting to join like the California MBA because that's where our
Yes.
home office is, and the MBA in general. So
Yeah.
one of my colleagues who just became the president of our retail group, like she would go, but
Yeah.
as the vendor manager, I wouldn't go.
Okay. So I would encourage you to ask, even if you get told no. But I think, just to use you as an example, I think if you raised your hand and said, I know that normally maybe somebody in my role doesn't go. However, a lot of our vendors are there and I want to be able to establish, like a relationship with them. I want to, really see what else might be out there, that I should, perhaps be thinking about. I mean, I don't know exactly what the words are,
Mhm.
but you might just at least raise your hand and ask because you could be surprised. And in some cases, depending on what it is, if it's not a giant investment, it might be worth it to say, hey, I'm willing even to, I'll pay my registration if you'll just pay my travel expenses or vice versa, something like that. Because I do think conferences, I will say, and there's also online things, there's things that are local to your area. There's a lot of things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, but I do find that the conferences have been, extremely, and Molly will probably echo this as well, because certainly she's very familiar with this space. It is where you do get so much opportunity to network with people that every single conference I've been to, even when I have gone on my own dime, I've been like, I'm so glad that I went because I've without fail met someone who's been, turned out to be a really good connection for me. I'm going to pause on that for a second to see if any of you else have anything to say, or Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually, that's where I met Molly, was at Women Empowering Women. So I've been doing that for 4 years, but the other conferences I haven't. But that that group is just jam packed with a bunch of phenomenal women. So it's a
Yep.
lot of bang for the buck, but it's been on my own dime. So I have been doing that one. But I hear what you're saying. Thank
Yeah.
you for your advice.
Worth asking. So
Mhm.
I would encourage, like I said, because I do think, I mean, if somebody said, what are your top ways to network with people? Certainly conferences, as I said, and LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Um, Conferences, also, there's a lot of things that happen online. There's webinars where you do get, a chance to have some kind of connection with a speaker, with, different various people, but it's kind of getting engaged in those groups. A few of the kind of hot tips that I would give you if you do go to conferences, um, always watching out for if you have someone you want to know, if maybe it's a prospect, maybe it's a customer, maybe it's just somebody that you admire or just is a great subject matter expert that is on the stage. This is like one of my hot tips. I don't tell everybody this, but I'm going to give you this one because it works so well. So if you, whoever's on the stage, if you sit in their session, take pictures of them on stage and take nice pictures where they look good, where you don't, like a lot of times you take a picture and it looks like the room is empty and it's like, don't like send them those pictures, crop it, right? Like make them look good or make it look like there's people in front of them. But if you will take some good pictures of whoever is on that stage, you don't have to know their email address, but if you send them those pictures through LinkedIn, just do a LinkedIn direct message and say, I really enjoyed your session. I got so much out of it. Thank you so much. I thought I'd share these pictures with you. Every single speaker wants pictures of themselves on stage. About 0% of the time, maybe 2% of the time, do you ever get pictures of yourself on stage, right? And even the big fancy people, they want a picture of themselves because they want to post something on social media to be like, oh, I did this thing. They will never forget that you did that for them, especially if you do it quickly. If you do it literally while you are in the session or right, like very immediately, you will win the opportunity to have a really good connection with that person. Um, along those same lines, when people come off the stage at an event, a lot of times people are like, oh, I shouldn't talk to that person because I'm sure, well, you know, when people come off the stage, I'm here to tell you, they feel awkward, they feel weird. They're like, why is nobody talking to me? Maybe they didn't like it. And it is the greatest gift that you can give them is to march over to them and go, wow, that was fantastic, and shake their hand and like pour some love into them, because I'm telling you, it doesn't matter who it is. Everybody who's walking away like from like being on the stage in front of people wants that. Deb, did you have something?
No, I was just, that makes so much sense, because you were talking before, like people, when you do your networking, you leave it all out there, right? And you come back and you're exhausted. So you're, a speaker's got to feel the same way. I don't speak, but I have to imagine that is, you know, that's exactly you're filling back up.
It is. And you never forget the people who come over to you like after, especially because you just have this moment where you're like, nobody's talking to me. They must have hated it. You know, like you feel so awkward. So it is a wonderful gift, and you can make a great connection with somebody who's just been featured, you know, as a subject matter expert or somebody on stage. Deborah, I see your hand raised.
I wanted to note that actually worked for me. I just went to the MBA servicing in Dallas, and I'm kind of new at this branding and selling myself. It used to be a good resume was enough. But I strategically planned my conference around the panels so that I could approach them after, because you're right, they are very receptive. I mean, you might have to wait in a short line, but they are very receptive to talking after a panel.
Yes. And I'm going to double down on that and say, and we're going to shift to LinkedIn, and there's a little mashup between conferences and LinkedIn. If you can have the courage to say, may I take a picture with you? You're going to make that person's day. And then you can post that picture on LinkedIn and just say, you know, I went into the session with, tag them, you know, so-and-so, and here's a few of the key things that they shared. You're aligning yourself with that person who has a bunch of followers, right? And so that's going to attract people to your network. You're sharing something of value. You're sharing some content about what they shared. And so do not hesitate, even if I could leave you with like one thing to go do, like start taking more selfies of yourself with your customers, with your colleagues, with your, you know, not your prospects. Don't take pictures with your prospects because you don't want to tip off the competition if you're in sales. But take pictures with, like I said, your teammates, the people that you're working with, your customers. If you can get yourself over the hump, because a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I don't like pictures of myself. Like, well, you know what? This is what we all look like. We're all looking at each other. This is what our faces look like. Just, you know what? Take a picture. Jenny said she asked Suha that very thing at the AI conference last year, and she was gracious. Of course she is, because she's amazing, Suha. But if you think about doing that, so as we kind of transition to thinking about LinkedIn, you kind of associate yourself with that person. You're tagging yourself, so you're hitting their network as well, right? And so there's going to be people who are like, oh, who is this? This is very interesting. And it's a gracious thing to do for someone else. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that is kind of my theme through networking is how do you lift up somebody else? Because you kind of come along for the ride when you lift up someone else. And it's amazing about how powerful that is in networking. A last thing about conferences before we do kind of go over a little bit to LinkedIn is I would encourage, even though it's super old school, it works. I would encourage you all to have business cards. So I know the cool thing is to have the thing that you scan and you got the cool like thing and you just put your phone on my phone and they like kiss and then we have each other's contact. That's awesome if you have time for that. But very often, if you go to any conference that where there are a lot of people there, you don't have time for that. You're passing in a moment in a hallway and you got 30 seconds with that person. There's no time to like stop and do the thing. You're going to miss it. And it is, to me, I mean, the vast majority of people, especially now, have a mobile number on their business card, and they either will text you, they'll give you their business card, because there's a lot of people still have business cards out there like me. They'll give you their card, and having that person's mobile number is everything. I mean, that's how I gauge kind of like, you're really networking with somebody when you get their mobile number and you can text them. That's kind of one of the things that we ask in some of the meetings where it's like, well, do you know this person? It's like, well, I'm on a texting basis with, okay, all right. So if you get their mobile number and you can text with them, that's kind of a big deal. So, Suha, yes.
I was just going to say, if you have the ability on your business card, because that's what I've done, I print like a personal message, different quotes, or, have a great day. I hope you're having a great time, or something that makes it personal on your business card, because that also resonates. And so when you give it to them and they turn it over, it's like, oh, how nice.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
I love that. That's so cute. I should start doing that. I love that. That's a brilliant idea. But we talked a little bit about kind of taking pictures. How do you post that on social? Kind of going then from conferences and what you're doing at conferences, taking pictures of speakers, taking pictures at events, or what have you, or even just in your meetings. I mean, that's another really big thing. If you're in a situation where you're like, I don't get to go to conferences, but I do meet with prospects, even if it's, or excuse me, not prospects, don't take pictures of yourself with prospects. You don't want to tip off the competition, but with customers, even if it's online, sometimes if you're just having a good meeting online and you just say, you know what, I'm so proud of like all the cool things you're accomplishing. Can I just take a quick screenshot of us, having this conversation together? Cause I just want to like kind of brag you out on social media. People will generally say yes to that. And if you are with them in their office, I love to get in front of like their sign, that says, whatever their company is, get in front of their sign, take a picture, have somebody else take the picture. Again, until you get yourself over the hump, it can feel a little like, oh, this is weird, but people love it. I mean, they love to be called out. I mean, if you can, again, when you're with you all have customers that you're working with, and either online or in real life, if you take that opportunity to lift them up on LinkedIn, people will never forget that. It makes them feel special. And you have kind of, again, you've aligned yourself with this organization by putting it out there. I do a lot of consulting with technology companies, and I will always scroll through their LinkedIn, and it shocks me, lender and vendor, like how infrequently people actually raise up their customers. Now, it's a different thing from a corporate level. If you're at a big company and there might be, like, oh, there's MSA, we got to be so careful of these things. I know we got you QC and, risk people on here. They're like, no, you can't do that. I know sometimes on a corporate level, you can't do it because you might have MSAs in place that say you can't use our name if whatever, but you always can do it when you're just with a person, a human that you're working with, and you as a human, can you generally do that? And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, if you bump into anything else. I'm a little bit forgiveness, not permission, but I've never had a problem with it. I will say that by raising up a customer and calling them out and saying, man, they're amazing. They're innovating. They're really looking out for their, customers, their consumers, their loan officers, whatever the case might be. That's how you can bring yourself kind of along for the ride. Again, be sure to pop anything into the chat. I know, oh my gosh, we're almost out of time, but I want to talk about LinkedIn, and then I'm going to stop and we'll make sure we take any last questions here. On LinkedIn, the biggest thing that I would tell you is make sure that when be active on LinkedIn. It is very weird to me. I don't know exactly the science of how it all works. Suha probably does, but I know that if there's somebody that you'd really like to get to know better, if you start liking and interacting with their posts, you comment on them, you like them, the algorithms work such that they're going to start seeing more of your stuff. So number one, it's a nice thing. Like when just to comment, people always, there's a little moment of vulnerability when people put a post out there. They're like, is anybody going to like it? Is everybody going to comment? And I think when you can just be like, yes, I like it. And yes, I'm going to comment. I think that means a lot to people. And then the algos work such that people are going to start seeing what you post. I would encourage you to not do any posts on LinkedIn without a picture or a video. If I could encourage you to try to start doing videos, even if, I do videos with no makeup on, with my hair standing up. Y'all have probably seen them, and I have learned to, most of the time, I just do one take and then I just send it. And I know it's not perfect, but it's me and I'm not perfect, and nor is anybody listening, and it's a little more real. And so if you can, if I could encourage you, that was probably one of the biggest things, was starting to crack open the network online. I really wasn't on LinkedIn that much until, I don't know, X number of years ago, not that many years ago. I mean, I was a late comer to LinkedIn, but I saw this little video thing and I was like, oh, look at that. I could record a video. So, but engage with others on LinkedIn and they will in turn engage with you. But try video. If I could encourage you to do that. I know people are like, oh, I don't like what I look like on video. This is what you look like, right? so I would encourage you to do it. I want to go to the questions because I know we're getting short on time here. Molly, have you made any mistakes when building your network? How do you repair if you let a connection go cold? That's interesting. That's a great question. I'd love to hear something from the group. I guess my own thoughts on that are, sure. I mean, I've made all kinds of mistakes by, one of the mistakes probably I have made, I'll be honest, is I don't always, because I don't always remember people's faces and names. And especially if you do start speaking and you're going to like go on a lot of things, I just can't always remember. And so I have learned, because I've embarrassed myself by being like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. And they're like, yeah, we've literally met before. And it makes you feel so bad. So one of my little tips on that is I always say, it's so great to see you. I never say it's nice to meet you. I always say it's great to see you, because then I'm covered if I have met them before. I always, if you're at a conference and the name tag is awkwardly right here and you can't look at it without being obvious, compliment the shoes, and you get a chance to kind of look down and you're like, oh, I love your shoes. And they look down, you're like, oh, it's Tom Peterson. Okay, good. So, but I think, Molly, I guess if you let a connection go cold, people are all busy with their own lives. They probably haven't noticed it and been offended. Just jump right back in there. Haven't talked to you in a while. I can't wait to reconnect. But I'd love to hear if there's other things that people have to say on that. Jump in.
Well, I have let connections go cold, and I've been the connection someone let go cold. And when someone has reached out to me, I realize that we have a lot of grace for folks, but we don't have a lot of grace for ourselves. So we're far more offended for that person that we let that connection go cold for than they are that it went cold, because they didn't reach out either. Right?
Right.
So it really is, it's a relationship. So if I know it, I have been a bad whatever. I have not reached out to you in a couple months. Let's connect soon. And if they're truly offended and they don't want to, continue to, grow that relationship, okay. Like, I understand. Absolutely, I've offended you in some way. But for the most part, people are so very forgiving, as you are forgiving. I think we forget to give that other folks give us grace as we would.
That's so smart. That's so smart. I'm so glad you said that, Kristen, because it's very true. We are much harder on ourselves than other people ever are on us. And we cause ourselves a lot of angst that's generally unnecessary. Deb, you asked, how often do you touch base with connections that are not at conferences or networking events? I do the best that I can. I used to have a list of here's the 40 people that I gotta make sure that I'm checking in with. And I literally would have this piece of paper and I'd carry it around with me in my car. And if I was just traveling from point A to point B, I would be like, okay, I need to call this person because I haven't talked to them in a while. My life is such at the moment with a lot of family obligations and commitments that I kind of just do the best that I can. And it's one of the things that LinkedIn is really wonderful for. I've been a little bit lame on LinkedIn probably over the last little bit, but again, I'm not going to beat myself up, or I'll do a video tomorrow and, we just all move on. Right. And, but I would say if you're in kind of a situation where you really do have some key contacts, if it's people that are really important and you want to be intentional about it, what I would tell you to do is put it, I'm a big time blocker. I'd take those names, put them, put all of them, or, parcel them out across, on your calendar. Cause that's the only way that I personally find to do things, is if I have it time blocked in my Outlook, or it just does not happen. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes sense. Totally makes sense.
What I would add to what Kristen was saying, every time I've let a connection go cold and then I reach out to them, every single time it's like, oh my God, it's so great to hear from you. I know it's been a while.
Yeah.
let's get on a Zoom, or let's, if there's in local, let's get together or whatever. So I think you're absolutely right, Kristen. People are very forgiving, and we're much harder on ourselves.
Yes. Just generally speaking, that is 100% true. For sure. Oh gosh, Laura, you are so sweet to ask about my son and daughter, son-in-law and daughter. Yes, my crazy enough, briefly in 2023, my dad passed away the day before my wedding, and my son-in-law was diagnosed with leukemia a week after my dad's funeral. So it was like a messed up little time, and I did share, some of that on social media, just partly because it was like my wedding and my birthday, and my dad had passed away, like literally in the course of 3 days. And I was my inbox was the weirdest place, where everybody's like, what's going on? I haven't heard from you. And I'm like, I know. So I kind of just shared, hey, everybody, there's crazy stuff going on. He is in full remission. He had a stem cell transplant just over a year ago, healthy, gaining weight and much improved. So thank you for asking, Laura. And on that note, I would encourage you to share. I know they're like, LinkedIn is for professional, but we are in a very personal industry. We're in a people industry, and share about your life. And I don't think I feel like there was a time when people are like, what are you doing posting that graduation photo? That's not the place for it. Not in our industry. In our industry, we're like, man, a lot of us have been in this a long time. We've like seen, birth, death, marriage, divorce, illness, all of the things. So definitely share about your personal life. And actually, that's probably a great note, because I know we got to wrap up in a minute here. But I mean, I think probably in networking, like I loved actually at the outset of this call, I loved very much hearing like, what are you doing after this? I liked hearing about puppies and reading to the littles, and my husband's going to cook dinner for me, and just like, I'm going to make guacamole with, my guests who are here. And like, I love that. And that's what, that's the beauty of networking, is I feel like I know you all a little bit more than I did before we started this call. And my one ask for you, because I know, Jenny, I know you said like personal stuff is hard, but I bet, Jenny, I mean, just even if it's, gosh, you'll find, I mean, I would encourage you to find an opportunity, just about, and again, you reach out to me. I mean, I could, go over some ideas with you. And that would be my ask with all of you, is please, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, please connect with me on LinkedIn. If we are connected on LinkedIn, just like shoot me a little note. So just so I make sure that I've kind of got everybody that's here. And I am going to ask if we can snap a picture of this before we wrap up. And so I just, look at, okay, girls. All right. I love it. We are going to